Hello, everyone, and welcome to our discussion tonight. So tonight we are having a discussion on the Tax Advocate Service, and we have as our guest panelist who will be speaking more about this. He has quite extensive experience in this area, and he will speak and say and tell us more about what it is, why is it important, especially for Africa administration, and also like for taxpayers across Africa. You're welcome to share any questions that you may have and any thoughts that you may have on the topic. We will have the recording shared on different platforms from Facebook to Twitter and YouTube. And as and when you watch this, you can ask questions. Henry, I welcome you to introduce yourself and then to we'll get the conversation started. Welcome.
Well, thank you so much, and Catherine for Christian for inviting me, and I'm really excited to be part of iShare webinar this evening. My name is Henry Gaperi, and I'm currently working with the IMF as a regional tax administration advisor, but I'm here to share my experience in tax administration, especially on the topic of the role of advocate service in fostering tax compliance in Africa. And this I'm drawing from my experience as a tax administrator, as somebody who has been a commissioner general countries in Rwanda and also in Togo. And this is something that I believe in, and I've seen it work. So just going to the talking points, to the topics that you and your colleagues had to me. The first point is what is Taxpayer Advocate Service? Simply put, Taxpayer Advocate Service is created to help taxpayers to solve their issues with the tax administration. Big issues that affect taxpayers as a whole, and that looks at systemic or big picture issues, which often may lead to proposed legislative and administrative changes to address those issues. The basics, when you look at basic characteristics of Taxpayer Advocate Service, would be probably an independent organization within the tax administration. The service which represents the rights of an individual or corporate taxpayers who often may have financial difficulties. Taxpayers can also use issues with the tax administration when all other avenues have been exhausted. This service should be free and, of course, confidential. And as I said, also looking at big picture problems. The you wanted me to introduce was why is it important in the operational process of tax administration? Well, in general, the Taxpayer Advocate Service will take on one's case if they are facing an economic burden, if there is a systemic burden, or if it believes your rights or guarantees of equitable treatment are jeopardized. And this does not only mean that it's only small taxpayers that are affected in that way. often the medium and big taxpayers are also in this kind of problem. And the problem is sensitive. It may be sensitive in terms of financial harm. The tax administration may not be communicating adequately with the taxpayer. There could be a breakdown in the way the tax administration is solving problems. And quite often you also get cases where the circumstances facing the taxpayer are unique and may not be actually addressed in the law. I remember one of my former capacities, we had a case where one of the taxpayers came up with a product of leasing, which is not actually reflected in the law and in the common practices of the tax administration. And in that case, you have to discuss it and come up with a way that will allow the taxpayer to continue working, while you are also looking at ways of making sure that that kind of problem solution is streamlined within the laws of the country. The next point is what you wanted to know some of my experiences in that area of taxpayer advocacy. One of the most important thing, I think, for people in tax administration, those are who are in management, it's more really of there's a very big chunk in taxpayer advocacy in what should be done on a day-to-day basis. And this includes, for example, coming up with the new tax policy. Now, I know that when you talk to people in developed countries, tax policy is a preserve of the Ministry of Finance and the higher levels on that. But really, they depend on the expertise that is within the tax administration. And the experience that I've seen is that most of the good elements of tax policy starts within the tax administration. And would it be to come up with a policy that is not going to be actually put in practice? So part of the experiences I've been involved in is actually formulating tax policy. And when you have in mind that you are actually working for the taxpayers, and I will come to this why it should be, then you are bound to come up with good tax policy that favors business to prosper. And then when business is prospering, you will as a tax administration. So getting involved in tax policy, overhauling of tax laws, and making sure that the business processes are engineered with a view of improving service delivery, and introducing the use of technology to make sure that there is more transparency and the service standards are respected. And all of this should be done to facilitate the taxpayer. And when you actually avoid a lot of problems and help the taxpayer to save on compliance cost. There is also, as part of taxpayer advocacy, is actually that the senior managers have to make sure that they work towards changing the staff attitude towards taxpayers and the taxpayers' attitude towards staff. Because I think the way the tax administration has been coming along, I think we've come from the background of where we insist on more control than actually looking at taxpayers as partners. And when you have a partner, when a partner suffers, you also suffer, of course. And also some additional experience. When you take an active role in taxpayer advocacy as a senior manager in tax administration, then it helps you to build bridges and alliances with other institutions, especially the members of parliament and senators, so people's representatives. When you are talking from the same page, then it makes it easier for you to talk with them and make sure that you come up with a tax system that works for the taxpayers, and the government also benefits, and in so doing, the citizenship, the citizens of the country also benefit from that. And I think when you look at the best, say, a medium-sized taxpayer or even large taxpayers, in general, the government gets more than each investor. When you look at the pay as you earn, the GST or VAT, corporate tax income, property taxes, when are put together, in most cases, you will see that the take home from a given venture by the government is actually more than, often more than what a particular investor in that venture gets. So it makes sense that any particular government should have an interest when somebody starts a business. And so it's of a particular interest to make sure that a taxpayer does not only survive, but also prosper. And when he prospers, the government gets more out of that. The other talking point is the role, in my role, do I think, what can I advise tax administrations across Africa as good practice for taxpayers advocacy? There's no question that taxpayer advocacy is a very important element in tax administration. And tax administrations exist because taxpayers exist. There will always be problems facing the taxpayers related with and when we realize that fact, then it goes without saying that the more we assist taxpayers, the better, as we assist them and just give them a second chance to continue to operate. And you can only do that if you understand their problems, if you are able to work with them to iron out a number of issues. Sometimes when we are not careful, taxation problems can also kill entrepreneurial spirit. Most people who want to become entrepreneurs may come in, they have ideas, but they are not aware of what is happening in the tax system. And they often make a lot of mistakes. So as tax administrations, we should be able to help them to get out of those problems because we need them. We need those kind of entrepreneurs in the economy. Their contribution increases the tax base. So we should be keenly interested in that. Our role is not only to go strictly to administer the law, what it says. We should always go beyond and also help the economy to grow. Taxpayer advocacy helps also tax administrations to continue to improve in terms of service delivery, in terms of designing better tax systems and bringing government to citizenship, social contract. The other talking point is to give some perspective on taxpayer Bill of Rights. A number of countries have taxpayer Bill of Rights. Some have actually put them in law. Others have what they call taxpayer charters. But really, the whole point is to make the environment better to a taxpayer. And they describes and defines a number of rights and builds upon the tax administration's corporate values. For example, in Canada, you have the Canada Revenue Service. They have corporate values of professionalism, respect, integrity, and cooperation. And they have 16 rights that are listed. In the US, they have 10 rights. So it varies really from country to country what they see as what is important in it. It describes the treatment a taxpayer is entitled to when they are dealing with the tax administration. And the Taxpayer Bill of Rights also sets out the tax administration's commitment, especially to small businesses, to ensure that their interaction with tax administrations are conducted as efficiently and effectively as possible. There is also a number of countries have a taxpayers charter, which defines the taxpayer's rights and obligations under the law, and also specifies the tax department's commitment to improve service delivery to the taxpayers. So just as a sample of the Bill of Rights, you have, say, the right to be informed, the right to quality service, the right to pay no more than the correct amount tax, the right to challenge the administration's position and be heard, the right to appeal the tax administration's decision in an independent forum, the right to finality, so that you don't pull the problem for a long time. You know, if you are doing an audit, perform the audit and get it finished in a given time. The right to privacy, the right to confidentiality, the right to retain representation, the right to a fair and a just tax system. The next talking point is how can the rights of a taxpayer foster tax certainty and improve compliance? With this, you have clarity of rights and obligation and clarity of do's and don'ts and good practices. I think this is very important for taxpayers, because if there is anything that can kill initiative of entrepreneurship and investors is uncertainty. And when when the rights are clear and the obligations are clear, and when you have somebody on the other line, on the other side, who is ready to help you, to advocate for you in service delivery, then it gives you more confidence to do what you want to do. And I think it's a very important thing. Whenever there is more clarity in tax administration, it is a positive thing, and it gives more confidence to the taxpayers. It helps in their planning process because they are sure of their rights. They know who can help. So this is a good thing. The next one is the synergy between advocacy and domestic resource mobilization. What lessons can African tax administration learn from this from my personal experience? I think, as I said before, tax administration is in partnership with the taxpayers. And when the taxpayer community is not doing well, the tax administration also suffers, and definitely it will not be able to meet their targets. So that kind of interaction is important to make sure that the whole ecosystem of tax in a given country is complete, because the tax system would be incomplete if you don't have a taxpayer, and if you don't have a tax administration, and if doing what they are supposed to be doing, the whole system suffers. So, and definitely it impacts on resource mobilization, because if the taxpayers are only tied down into problems and arguments with the tax administration, and they are not given the right solutions so that they can spend more time developing their businesses, eventually the tax administrations would not have the taxes that they are looking for, because the taxpayers, if the taxpayers are not making money, then they are not going to be able to meet their obligations in paying taxes. So it's that partnership between the tax administration and taxpayers and all other interest parties, the policymakers, the legislators, that improves resource mobilization. And also making sure that while you are doing that, you support the economy, because basically, for me, I take tax administration is like harvesting, having a farmer, harvesting. When you harvest, if it is a crop that goes on for long, you don't just uproot the roots. You make sure that you harvest, but also help the plant to continue to grow, so that the following day you are also able to harvest, and the next season you are able to harvest. So the tax administrations have an obligation to support economic growth and keep taxpayers in business and support them to grow. The next talking point is whether I agree with low trust leads to more control. Yes, I agree with this, and control here means things like audits and enforcement, collection, and investigations and all that kind of thing. Yes, I think control is not the only way to improve taxpayer compliance. The purpose is to cause the taxpayer to change behavior, and the cost of compliance. The control is very costly also. So it's costly on the side of tax administration, it's costly on the side of taxpayer. There are other means like cooperative compliance, there is taxpayer education, there is taxpayer facilitation and service delivery. I think just to quote Abraham Maslow, who said, this was in 1966, he said, I suppose it is tempting if the only tool you have is a hammer to treat everything as if it was a nail. So control, that's audit and enforcement, is a hammer that tax administration has. But it's not the only tool. And of course, every problem in tax administration is not a nail. So there are so many problems, there are so many challenges in tax administration, and those challenges should be addressed to ensure that taxpayer compliance improves. And yes, control has some part to play, but it should not be the main thing, because not all taxpayers are the same. They have different behavior. Some taxpayers are willing to pay and meet their obligations right away. Others may need some limited assistance. And then there are a few others who may need to be pushed where enforcement activities are needed. It's not only that every time there is a challenge, the tax administration should be rushing to do the audit and enforcement. So I think I should stop here, and probably if there are any questions, I would be happy to brainstorm with you colleagues, and let's see how to push this forward. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you so much for your presentation. I think there are very good points you've made in the presentation, and I think that are worth noting, especially because for most African tax administration, collecting the revenue is the end point. It's the goal. It's the or where everything stops, so that collecting revenue is almost like what is the full time and the aim, the goal, and everything that happens. And so, like having someone who gives the taxpayer a voice, like someone to also represent the taxpayer, and to actually look at the taxpayer as an investment, that you're putting in an investment that is going to benefit you in the future as the revenue administration. You're not just harvesting, fishing for the youngest fish, the oldest fish, and just literally draining all life out of the lake. And I think that has been an attitude that possibly will need to be improved on. And also, as you said, it's very costly. And if you look, like, for most taxpayers, there's a lot of tax agents. Like most of the big audit firms, for instance, will have a dedicated tax department, which is making quite a lot of money helping taxpayers just comply, because the cost of not complying is so high, and there's a full-time team that is dedicated from the consultants, from the lawyers, trying to like deal with most of the tax administration's assessments that they raise, and it's enforcing compliance. So it's quite, I think, a shift in attitude that would really be helpful. And this is such a very good presentation and points you've made, and I hope a lot of this is taken into account. Um, and I think the question there hasn't been any questions at least that have come to us right now, but I think from what you said, I think the question that I would have, especially within Africa, do you have any experience of any tax administrations that have practiced this, that have a fair amount of taxpayer advocacy service that's being offered? If you can point to any countries within Africa that are doing that. And then you mentioned there's Canada, there's the US that's doing that. And so, what other places that you'd point to for like more like almost like a benchmark for someone trying to look at this, so that we see like how it works, and why is it that most Africa tax administrations don't seem to be pursuing this keenly. There's a bit of maybe taxpayer education, and also possibly if you can point at like the US, they would possibly even help the low income, like the low income person who cannot afford to hire a tax agent, because you see, most taxpayers who can afford to hire, let's say, a big audit firm to advise them, it's different from a startup which is really struggling. They don't have much money that they can afford on professional fees. So, like, what kind of support would be needed for such startups, to support them when they can't afford fees, to have a full-time team advising them on compliance? So, if you could make comments to those points, then we will possibly conclude the discussion.
Thank you so much. You are right. There is a very big industry of tax agents, and of course it's also it's big, but it's also lucrative. And if you look at how they do their work, actually, they I think for any tax agent, they do survive because they establish a very good rapport with tax administrations. And this is actually what the taxpayer should be doing. But of course, it also depends on how receptive the tax administration. They are prepared to do that. They should be prepared to do that. Now, most of the tax administrations I've worked with or seen especially in East and Southern Africa, they do actually have, most of them started with the concept of not taxpayer advocates as such, but taxpayer services, which was actually an idea leading to taxpayer advocates service. And they've had this for over 10, 20, now coming to 20 years. So it has evolved into that. So if you go to places, to Kenya, for example, to Rwanda, you'll find those examples there. And quite a few of them have also tried to establish tax clinics, which tend to be for small taxpayers and individuals who may be struggling or who may need more assistance in making sure that they are meeting their tax obligations. But the large taxpayers tend to have their tax agents, but also with them, because the large taxpayers have access to the management, they have access to the ministers of finance, so to engage, and then those officials will advocate for them. So it's not a well-developed the African countries that I've seen, but quite a number of countries have come up with a way to mitigate that. I know a few countries, for example, in Rwanda, they have a group called the Tax Policy Group, which actually has ministry, experts in taxation, independent experts, and the tax administration. So within that group, if there is a big issue in that is unique, and come up meant for policies and changes in legislation. Also, to do it being used in the US may be very expensive for the country to run. So somewhere there lies an intermediate solution of, because our tax administration tend to be smaller, because our countries are also smaller, so it may be a very big and costly undertaking to establish a fully fledged organization within on that. But I think, some departments may do within the tax administration, and really, they can be given facilities, facilitated to make sure that they are constantly engaging with the taxpayers and solving their problems. To me, I think it makes a lot of tax administration to put more emphasis on solving problems, or even mitigating for problems before they happen, than waiting for the problems to happen. And because when you wait, you end up wasting a lot of resources, and it becomes more costly than if you engage and iron out issues even before they become bigger.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Henry, for the comments that you've made. and that's very helpful. And I think we'll close at this point, and thank you for the contributions that you've made to this discussion tonight. And we appreciate the time that you've taken, and we will get hopefully this information like a bit more listened to by taxpayers, and to see what it would look like if like this was adopted fully within Africa tax administrations. But then also it's helpful because it just gives an idea to people of how other systems are working. And even if as of today we will not adopt this thing fully in every African country, then at least to even make aware, create awareness that this is actually something that works, and you can have a relationship with taxpayers where you actually relate as if you're partners and working towards a common goal and supporting one another. But thank you so much for coming on tonight. We really appreciate this. So, and everyone who has been watching this or listening to this, we thank you. You can leave your comments, and we will endeavor to respond to them in due time. And we will invite our panelists back some other day to follow up on the discussion, possibly go a bit more in depth, possibly on taxpayer bill of rights and that kind of thing, to see how that would look like. And especially because some African countries have such rights in their constitutions, it may not be possibly like a right to, you have right to fair administrative action, you have right to property, the constitution protects that, only that maybe they haven't expressly called them taxpayer bill of rights. But thank you so much for tonight, and we will invite you back again sometime.